Hello everyone, my name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you so much for joining me and welcome to another question and answer session number 8. So having just hit 9,000 subscribers, I'm doing this video as a thank you, answering your submitted questions so you can get to know a little bit more about me. I've got 30 questions ranging from 25 different viewers, and it breaks down as 28 music related questions and 2 personal questions. Normally we get some about my channel, but there are no questions on that this time. And so just to catch you guys up, anyone who might be new out there joining for the first time, I am a licensed registered architect in the state of New York, which is why I'm wearing my architect shirt. I always wear this whenever we're doing channel related videos, something different than my rock shirts and stuff like that I usually wear during the actual videos that are being posted about the bands and artists that we love. And so of course my passion is music, and I started collecting 33 years ago in 1989, and I have over 11,000 CDs and over 200 box sets. And so as always, I will do my best to pronounce each person's name right, but let's go ahead and jump into it here. And so kicking things off, we've got music related questions, 28 of these. The first one comes from Mikkel Bowden, and he wants to know, have your musical preferences changed since the 80s when you started collecting? And generally, no, they have not, but they have broadened. And so I started pretty much with just metal music, but it's now sort of ballooned into classic rock, prog rock, new wave, glam metal, alternative rock, punk, and more. And I still pretty much like all the same bands that I started out with, ranging from Motley Crue to Slayer to NXS to Pink Floyd, you name it, all the bands that you see showing around me here. I love all those bands. I grew up with them and they still hold a very special place in my heart. All right, next question comes from Thunderstruck with 3 Z's at the end of it. Are there any solo artists you enjoy more than their main bands? And the only person that really came to mind is Paul McCartney. I'm not as big a Beatles fan as I am a Paul McCartney solo fan. I found him as a solo artist. I went backwards to find him or to explore him as a Beatles artist. That's a little more pop. I like the straight ahead rock stuff that he does as a solo artist, so I'm much more a solo fan of his than of a Beatles fan, which I know is surprising to most, but that's just how it is for me. Everyone's different, right? All right, William Tyndale wants to know, what is your opinion on all these Frontiers Records projects? And so in my opinion, first and foremost, there's just too many of them. They were kind of cool when they first started out, but they're all really kind of starting to sound the same because they often use Alessandro Del Vecchio on them, or Alessandro Del Vecchio on them. And he often writes them. They have a couple other people that they use pretty regularly. And those people can just only write so many new songs and in so many different styles and so forth. So in my opinion, they're all pretty much starting to sound the same. I also don't like when they oftentimes put these super groups together and then those groups don't write. The songs are written for them. Now, as for the projects where the groups write their own stuff, I'm all for those. Keep putting them together, but let the bands write. Then I think it's great. So Black Swan is a great example of that. A band that was put together to do this. They're writing their own music. They sound great. First album was outstanding. Second one I think is even better than the first one. So hopefully those will continue. I've passed on some of those other ones that are sort of put together as studio projects and never do anything more. But the ones that are actual bands, I really do enjoy. All right. Mark Stanley wants to know, do you ever rip CDs and play the burned copy to protect the originals? And no, I don't. For me, at least, the CD itself, music, it's an art form. Everything from the packaging and the booklets and the music on it is such. So if I were to duplicate and make a copy of it, just wouldn't hold the same interest for me. I want to hold that art in my hand. I want to enjoy it. I want to see the art on the disc when I'm taking it out. The whole thing together means something to me. And so that is the main reason I don't do it. But also, if you just take really good care of your stuff and you're careful in the way that you operate, pulling the disc out and so forth, you have no worries. I've been operating my CDs for more than 30 years and I have not scratched them any more than, from the point when I got them, kind of a thing, and they're still playing just fine. So I haven't felt a need, at least, to do any of that. Charlie 10 wants to know, are there any albums in your collection that you despise? And the answer to that, plain and simple, is no. If I despise an artist, they don't go in the collection. I don't do any blind buys. I don't buy anything that I don't like. So I'm very particular about what goes in my collection. I may have 11,000 CDs, but each and every one of those albums, artists, were specific things that I wanted to buy and have in my collection. None of it is stuff that was simply given to me and or, like I said, a blind buy or something where I maybe don't like the artist. Per Gustafson wants to know, do you own any albums with artists singing in different languages? And so yeah, I do, a number of them. Loudness, Japanese band, Trust, which is a French band, Cat, which is a Polish band, and then I've got a number of different German artists, some singing all in German and some doing just the occasional song. But we got Rammstein, Doro, Udo, and there's just a lot of them. Even Scorpions have occasionally done the German song and so forth. So yeah, I do. Predominantly though, as an English-speaking person, I'm going to lean towards English-speaking artists, but I do have some outside interest in some of these other ones. And I've got a number of different Japanese artists, Bow Wow, and different than the 80s group that was named that, and a few others like that. But I do like a lot of Japanese artists. All right, Mark Durain wants to know, what is your favorite concept album? So you can actually see it there in the background, War of the Worlds. Here's a highlights disc from them. And this is Jeff Wayne, who put this project together in the late 70s, and it was a prog rock style thing. Interestingly, he redid it recently. This is the new version, that, you know, next generation or the new generation of, and he brought in different artists to do it. But it is a who's who of famous artists coming in to record these parts and so forth. And so while that one in the background is a prog rock, the newer one here is definitely a more modernized, updated sound to it. But yeah, definitely my favorite. Of course, I like classics like Queensryche, Operation Mindcrime, and I love Sabotage and all their concept albums and things of that nature. So yeah, have a lot of those in the collection. All right, Stephen Soltis wants to know, what is so special about Japanese pressings, and are they worth the extra cost? So in the case of Japanese pressings, oftentimes it's the packaging. They usually have bonus tracks, and for me at least, that is the thing that draws my attention to them more than anything, is to get that extra song by my favorite artist. Sometimes it is the sound, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit more in just a bit here. Sometimes the album itself is only released in Japan, and so that is the only way to get it. So you will often hear a lot about Japanese pressings for that reason, that they were only released in Japan and so forth. And so as a follow-up question to that, and to expand on that idea about why sometimes it's the sound, Metal God, and it's not Rob Halford, although I wish it was, is there a sound difference when listening to Japanese CDs? And yes, but only if it is the SACD or the HQ CD. And I do have one of those ones specifically calling out the HQ CD, so you can see what I'm talking about here. And this is a classic case of a Japanese one that only came out in Japan, and it was a new remixed edition of the Yes album itself. It also was an HQ CD, and it replicated the gatefold packaging of the original vinyl edition, but it also updated the art. This is different than the original art that was in it, so there was a number of reasons for me to pick that up. No bonus material on it, but different mix, only pressed in Japan, HD or HQ CD, and different art. So there's a lot of things like that, and you have to look into that and be aware of what you're buying and so forth, and sometimes it will make it worthwhile. And another question from Metal God wants to know, are there any vinyl albums that I'm on the lookout for? Not specifically vinyl. With over 11,000 CDs, I am a CD person, but as a whole, I often get asked the question if there's any Holy Grail albums I'm looking for, that sort of stuff. And to be quite honest, no, there's not. When I want something, I hunt it down until I find it, add it to the collection, and so it's not, I don't have a big list or anything like that. One thing I haven't been able to track down, only simply because it's very expensive and I just haven't wanted to spend the money on it, was the debut Rat EP on CD. I do have a vinyl edition of it, although I did just find out that it is going to get reissued, so I will add it to the collection that way. All right, Purple Temple 1 wants to know, since you buy a lot, do you see yourself as a compulsive buyer who has to own everything by an artist? And so first and foremost, I'm a music fan, but I'm also a collector. So yes, if you combine those two things together, I definitely want to own everything by my favorite artist. But I don't have to own everything by an artist. There are plenty of artists that I only own the albums from which I enjoy of their era or something of that nature. And then there's other artists that I'm a huge fan of. And yes, I want to own everything by, but I don't have to own live albums, greatest hits, things of that nature. Although sometimes I do get into purchasing those things after years of holding off on them simply because I want something a little different or new that I don't have after years of not being able to get it. So if you've been watching some of my new music finds, you've noticed I've been picking up a lot of greatest hits and the occasional live album simply because that's all that is left from those artists to find and own. All right, Roger R wants to know, what are your thoughts on jewel cases? And so specifically the difference between the parts that hold them, there's the ones that have the two dots and the ones that have the vertical pieces. So here's the one with the two dots there, and here's one of the ones that have the two vertical pieces in it. And so of the two, I definitely like the one like this that has the vertical pieces that are in it, whereas the two dots, oftentimes not quite enough to hold the booklet, and it'll slide out and you get the two dots imprinting on it. Sometimes that happens with the vertical ones as well, horizontal, whatever you want, long ones, I guess, whatever you want to call them. Sometimes that'll happen as well, but generally speaking, if I have my preference, I like the ones that are the long rectangular ones as opposed to the ones that are the dots. And just as a whole, I prefer jewel cases over digipacks and cardboard packaging and anything of the sort. A jewel case I can swap out if it cracks or breaks or gets too scratched up, but when a digipack cardboard packaging gets damaged, you have to rebuy the entire album itself, and that always seems like a waste to me. All right, Andres from Greece wants to know, what band would you like to see reunite? And you know, up until just about 2 days or so ago, I would have said Pink Floyd. But lo and behold, Pink Floyd has reunited, at least for one new song that they just released out called Hey Hey Rise Up. Now, generally also when I would have said that I wanted Pink Floyd to reunite, it would have been because I wanted Roger Waters as part of the lineup along with David Gilmour and Nick Mason, those three. However, if Pink Floyd stays reunited and continues to do any touring or recording, I will be just as happy to have David Gilmour, Nick Mason, and the current lineup doing that. So who knows, maybe my long wish, lived wish and so forth has finally happened. We'll have to wait and see on that one. But what band that is still together do you think should give it up? And I would say I don't have any specific bands for that, but bands that only have one original member and it's just, say, a drummer or a bassist, artists or musicians who don't typically define the sound, that kind of a thing. I would say those bands really shouldn't exist or be using the name. But there are a number of those that are out there, and some of them have other members in the lineup that are from classic eras, like Deep Purple. That should continue on. And then you have other ones where they have like sort of a super group of people like Quiet Riot, who has Jizzy Pearl singing, and it's got Johnny, sorry for getting his last name, but guy from Typo Negative, John Kelly, drumming for them. And so you've got, only the classic lineup bassist Rudy Sarzo in there, but the other members that are in there are from other bands and stuff. So it's sort of like a super group, and you got that going on too with like Leonard Skinner only having Gary Rosington on guitar. But when it's a guitar player or vocalist, I'm a little more lenient on what that is, because to me the guitar players and the vocalist define the sound far more than, say, a bassist or drummer, unless of course you are, say, either Neil Peart in Rush and or Primus with Les Claypool on bass, right? Okay, next up we've got Daniel Lothgren, and he wants to know, do you count box sets as one album or multiple albums? I only count box sets as one album, but that's also why I consider them different. When I said at the beginning of this that I have over 11,000 CDs, that's individual CDs. I also only count, I count double CDs, triple CDs as a single album, so I don't double count those. And I counted box sets separately, saying I have over 200 box sets. The 200 box sets, doesn't matter whether there's 10 discs or one disc in it, they are individual box sets. Okay, and he also wants to know, what are some unexpected albums in your collection? So I've got Adele, Lady Gaga, I've got a Tupac album, Tony Bennett, Neil Diamond. I've got a number of different things in my collection, stuff that just particularly liked or I wanted to try out and test. And I do enjoy, and so I've hung on to kind of a thing. Definitely don't despise any of those artists. They're just not ones that I typically listen to and not part of the typical genre of music that I get into, like I talked about at the beginning of the episode. All right, and Lawrence Watts Jr. wants to know, do you listen to jazz? And so I do appreciate jazz, but I certainly don't follow it as regularly as I do as everything else. I have even purchased some over the years, like Bella Fleck, Dave Brubeck, to name a couple. But as a whole, no, I don't really collect jazz. And James Levin wants to know, what is your favorite Faith No More album? And I think, like most people, it's The Real Thing, but I definitely like the albums that have all come post The Real Thing going thereafter. Definitely more a fan of that era of things, anything with Mike Patton in the lineup, than the earlier stuff, although I do have those earlier albums and do like the entire era of Faith No More. Heather from the 80s Live Here wants to know, are you into reggae and do you see much of it in New York City? Pretty much only Bob Marley across the board, meaning pretty much only Bob Marley in my collection and pretty much only Bob Marley and the Wailers and related artists to the Wailers that I'm seeing in New York as far as reggae is concerned. But I'm sure if I hit up a store that focused on that, there'd be a lot more. But in most cases, like a mainstream store is just going to carry Bob Marley. All right, Thomas Weary, apologize if I'm saying your name wrong. Do you go to many concerts? And obviously the pandemic has really messed that one up. So before the pandemic, I usually would go to somewhere between 8 and 12 concerts a year. And now, obviously in the last 2 years, I haven't hit up any concerts, but this year I do currently have 2 on the books to go see. On the 12th of April, I'm going to go see Little Feat. And then on June 6th, I'm going to go see Ringo Starr and his All-Star Band. So I'm excited about that. Don't know if I'm going to add any more at this point. I'm still a little on the fence and leery of going out and doing these big public things, but we'll wait and see what and how things unfold. Also, a lot of bands are hitting the road, but not all of them are hitting up New York City and or at least places that I want to go see them. So for me, at least, it really just comes down to who the artist is. I go out for specific artists. I don't go out just specifically to see live shows. All right, Fez Monkey wants to know, are there any bands that you used to love but not anymore? And I was way more into 90s rock, alternative rock, and stuff like that than I am now. So back in the early 90s, I owned a lot more of that sort of stuff than what I continue to follow of those artists today. I still have those artists, but I don't necessarily keep up with them as much as I did in the early 90s. And he wants to know also, are there any bands that you've tried to get into but can't? And so one artist, Frank Zappa, I've tried repeatedly to get into because there are certain songs and things that I really like by him. I am very impressed by what he can do, and then there's other stuff that I just simply don't get, that doesn't click with me. So oftentimes what it is I'll like parts of albums but not whole albums and things of that nature. So I do own one album, and I own, I think, 1 or 2 best ofs from him, and I sample them occasionally here and there, but just never really able to get deep into Frank Zappa. Do really respect him though. Steve Cross wants to know, is there a maximum limit to that which you'll spend on a CD? Generally speaking, no, but once I get upwards of $100, that's where I kind of start to draw the line. But if it's an artist I really, really want, or an album I've never seen before, or something I don't think I will ever find again, sometimes I will break down and go ahead and spend it. Most I've ever spent is somewhere around the $70 or $80 mark. I had recently just bought one at $100, but turned out to be one I could not play, had to return it, so I have yet to spend actually the $100 mark. Steve Cross also asks this question, along with Rick and Lynette, want to know which record store that has closed do you miss the most? And so in New York City, Virgin Music and Tower Records. I love those 2 places. Both of them were multi-story, huge record stores that had everything under the sun. I could literally spend all day in these places, just endless amounts of music in them. But back in Florida, where I grew up, in stores that are down south, places like Peaches, Turtles, Tracks, and one of my particular favorites, Specs. Loved those places. So those would be ones I wish I could go back and enjoy, have great fond memories from those. And then we've got Rick and Lynette asking another question. Which store besides Amazon do you think you've spent the most money in? Probably Virgin or Tower Records. Those are ones here when I first moved to New York that just boggled the mind. And of course I was making more money by then, so certainly could afford a lot more than the places as a teenager growing up. Didn't have as much money, otherwise it probably would have been those ones from back home in Florida. Roberto wants to know, do you think the CD will survive extinction? And I'm starting to lean towards the fact that it might. We're certainly seeing cassettes come back, although I think that's a bit of nostalgia there. But I would have thought by this point, with the rise of vinyl, that CDs would have completely gone extinct and so forth. And they have not. They've managed to stick around, which certainly means they have much more staying power. Also, we've seen repeatedly that physical music is still one of the biggest selling aspects by artists. So it does more than digital sales. So I certainly think that as the, most format, or the best format for getting music out there, is still the CD, that is going to stick around. It's still the cheapest and the easiest format for playing music. Vinyl itself is a bit of a nostalgia thing and costs about 3 times the cost of what a CD is. So at least for now, I think the CD is going to stick around, and we may find that it will start making its return as a nostalgic thing soon enough. We've certainly started to see a lot of artists focusing on the jewel case as a bit of nostalgia and announcing those and promoting those as part of their releases as they would the cassette and the vinyl aspect of things. So hopefully that is going to help out with the CD for us CD lovers. All right, Juan T wants to know, what do you think of movies like The Dirt? And The Dirt, if you don't know, that is one that is a biopic on Motley Crue. Surprisingly, I actually liked it. I didn't think that I would. It was made by Netflix, and I think they did a really good job on it. And he also wants to know, what are your other favorite movies that are related to music? In particular, I happen to really like the Oliver Stone movie, The Doors, and I like the most recent one on Queen called Bohemian Rhapsody. I do like biopics as a whole of my favorite bands. I haven't watched ones like on Rocket Man for Elton John and some of those other ones that are out there. But yeah, usually if they're done pretty well, I do like them. And then there's some other ones out there like Detroit Rock City, which is one that's themed on Kiss, but not really about Kiss. Those are a lot of fun. There's one called Thunderstruck that's themed around AC/DC. That's a lot of fun, stuff like that. So yeah, ones that are based on music, pretty fun. All right, and so wrapping up here, we got 2 that are based on personal questions that they want to know. First one up, Tom D wants to know, do you make architectural models of your projects? Yes, I do. 3-dimensional models, at least. We no longer do physical models of stuff. Everything is moved off digitally, much the way music has. And he also wants to know, can you show us any of that sort of stuff? And I will say this, despite me wearing the t-shirt and talking about it and letting you guys know I'm an architect, I do like keeping work, professional stuff separate from this, the personal and musical passion. So this is a music channel, so no, I don't want to get into that here. Although, for those of you that are a little interested in that sort of stuff, if you want to head on over to Facebook, follow me there. Occasionally, I do post things that are related to projects I'm working on there. A couple weeks back, I did post 2 projects, so if you want to go over there, follow me, scroll through, you will see photos of projects. Now, just to expand on that a little bit, part of why I don't share these things is a lot of these projects have non-disclosure clauses, and we work for famous clients or people that have a lot of money and don't want to announce that sort of stuff, so I can't show that work. So there is some of that stuff regarding this, and so when I can, I do show a little bit of stuff, but I also have to generally be quite vague about where projects are and who the projects are for and so forth. And so in general, just as a whole, I do like to keep them separate for that reason. All right, and for this last question, as you can see, I've changed my shirt because we have another question from Heather from the 80s Live Here, and she wants to know, what are your favorite sci-fi movies? So one of my favorites happens to be RoboCop and ones that are like that. I like disaster movies a lot, like The Core, Deep Impact, Day After Tomorrow, stuff like that. I love space movies like Interstellar and Passengers, and even ones that are non-sci-fi like Apollo 13, ones that are true story ones. But I also like monster movies like Godzilla, and of course I love classics like War of the Worlds, as you can see, from the concept album that's behind me, but also ones like Planet of the Apes. Heather, I know you like those too. And so, yeah, I love a lot of sci-fi. It's one of my favorite genres, along with action adventure style movies. And so there you go. 30 questions answered as part of Q&A session number 8. Hopefully you enjoyed that. As related videos, I will leave a link in the description below to the last Q&A, number 7, in case you want to check out that. I try to keep all the questions different on the occasion. Some of these do repeat, but I try to only re-answer questions with new answers if I can. So this one being the 8th one, there are 7 previous ones to go back and watch. If you want to check those out, just keep watching the previous one and the links will take you back to it and so forth. But hopefully you enjoyed this. You got to know a little bit more about me. And again, thank you so much for being a part of my channel, for submitting these questions, helping me to reach 9,000 subs, and hopefully onward and upward from here. All right, everyone, take care. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you all real soon. Bye-bye.